Welcome everyone to our Public Works Advisory Commission meeting. Today is April 10th. Whoa, gotta catch up here.
November, Chris.
November.
Wow. What am I saying? I don't even know what I'm doing. I got April's name involved there, and then that was a month, so I used that. November 10th, here we go. We have a city council meeting tonight, and on the agenda tonight will be an update for the master plans, the sewer, water, and stormwater master plans. And then 2 weeks ago, Laura gave an update and presented on funding options for these projects, these capital facility projects, as a result of our master planning process. But as you're all aware, we are in the middle of updating our master plans, which will include making some significant modifications. For example, back about 5 years ago or so, the City Council adopted what's called the State Street Master Plan. In the State Street Master Plan, we included a node or areas at intersections, for example, where densities could be allowed to increase, promoting some mixed-use developments and some more seamless integration between business, residential, and the consumers. Some of the key locations were at State Street and Center Street in Orem, University Parkway, and State Street, as well as 1600 North and State. And so there were a few locations where densities would increase. As a result of any increase in density, that can have an impact on utilities. These density increases do not affect stormwater necessarily very much, but they do or can affect water and also the sewer utilities. So that was one significant change that has occurred since our last master plan.
Hey, Chris, this is Carol. Can you
Carol,
hear me?
welcome.
I just joined. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Carol, we're just giving kind of a commentary update on master planning progress.
Okay.
Before we jump into the financial presentation that Laura Lewis will be presenting. So in addition to that change, one other significant change was we're working with Central Utah Water Conservancy District and the city of Vineyard to work out providing water through Central Utah's facilities. As a result, removing that demand on our system will have a significant positive impact that will be realized. And that'll be in our, a more in-depth presentation will be provided tonight by our consulting engineer, Bowen Collins and Associates. That meeting tonight starts, that's in a work session. The work session starts at 4:15. We anticipate our presentation will start around 4:30-ish or so. We'd like to make sure everyone here is invited to participate. If you would like to, I can send, we will send out an invitation to that for the city council meeting. It's a Zoom link, a Zoom meeting, and you just simply need to click on the link from your device. Neal and Reed, I'd like to turn some time over to both of you to give you some time to add to that, the takeaways, what we're finding and what we're realizing from these updates on these master plans. Neal, maybe you can jump in and go first.
Yeah, sure. The first thing I think that I would recognize is that we had a really good plan to start with. That's proving to be true on the capital facilities side, and it's proving to be true on the financial side. That indeed the needed infrastructure is not a lavish hope, but more a need for the citizens of Orem, and then the way to get there through the predictions and the assumptions with the rate structures. Particularly, I think, with the water rate structures and how that relates to the conservation of water on a per connection basis, and then a resultant downtick on the sewer side. And again, we'll get into that. But I think from a quick summary perspective, that's something I've noticed is that indeed we did some good iterations in the beginning and had a good plan. And I think also that revising this about this time and re-looking at it about every 5 years is also a wise practice.
Thanks, Neal. Reed, your perspectives? All right, thanks, Reed. So that was our commercial for tonight. So please come tonight for all more details. The presentation will be coming at 4:30 at council. We will send everyone here a link to that, and we sure invite you to come if you'd like to participate and be involved with that. Carol, are you on right now? I see.
Yes, I am.
Could I ask you to review the minutes and accept approval? That we have a quorum.
I reviewed them and I accept them.
Would you like to make a motion?
Make a motion that I approve the minutes from our last meeting. I remember the date, don't have it up.
Okay. The meeting noted on the agenda. Right.
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second? I'll second that. Yeah, all approved?
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Very good. With that, we'd like to introduce Laura Lewis. I think most of you know Laura. she was involved with our master planning process 6 years ago. Her firm is Lewis Young Robertson Birmingham. We've asked Laura to present today and provide an update on what has already been presented to the council 2 weeks ago regarding funding options for these projects. I think everyone is aware that we have developed a pay-as-you-go plan to pay for tens of millions of dollars worth of projects, for which we have saved quite a bit of money, but there has been an interest in evaluating other options that might be advantageous for the city and for the taxpayers of Orem. So with that intro, I'll turn the time over to Laura to present.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate that. I am not seeing on my screen a place to share my screen so that I can see the presentation.
At the bottom,
This one is that now.
that's it. Yep, that's it.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, we all have different electronic platforms for meetings, don't we? And so,
We don't want to see each other. There. I don't know if you can see it now. Can you see it now?
not yet.
Okay. The button that says share is not highlighted if I do anything with it.
So if you go to present now, and you click on your entire screen, and then it will give you an option of what screen to pick.
And it gives me an option that says, Edgewise will share the contents of your screen with me.google.com, so you'd like to share. But then it only has cancel is the only option I can click on. So I don't know.
When you press on present now, what are the options that come up?
Hold on. Present now. Your entire screen, a window, a Chrome.
Try a window.
That's it. Ta-da! Did you get it?
Yes.
Okay.
Very good.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry for that. Sometimes I'm very technologically challenged, so I apologize. It's good to be with you all this morning. I'm sorry my voice sounds a little bit rough. I've been fighting off what I think is a bad cold. I have been tested for COVID, but the results aren't bad. So I'm glad we're meeting remotely. It's a safe thing to do. So as I presented this to the council, I'd like to know in all honesty, this is rocket science. Sometimes stunning to people to see how the math works and the wonder of the world that is compounding. And in short form, the issue here is, would you rather pay 5% compounded for something over time, or would you rather pay 2.25%, give or take, over time? And again, that seems like a really simple question. You'd rather pay both than higher. And the numbers do prove out where we are right now, that interest rates are very low, especially on a tax-exempt basis, and construction cost indexes are quite high. So that's essentially what we're going to be going over. To come up with the information that's in this model, I have a lot of line by line detailed spreadsheets that I can certainly bring up if need be, but I summarize some of the pertinent cells from those Excel models. So just by way of background information, the city currently has 4 outstanding utility system revenue bonds. 2 of those pay off in 2026 and 1 pays off in 2029. The one that goes out the longest is a 2010 vintage, which is a state loan at the water rate of 0%. That was a good loan. Maturing in 2032. The city has been very good. I can't remember if Neal or someone else mentioned that you should pat yourself on the back as you have good capital improvement plans in place. The city has set aside a lot of funding for those projects, but they have not been fully. They've saved significant balance for the projects, which we'll talk about and how those will be utilized going forward if the city decides to apply for the balance. It's really important to understand that paying for large projects and what we refer to as multi-generational projects requires years of savings, but if you try to do it on a pay-as-you-go basis, it can seem very unfair to those that are paying now but aren't getting benefit of those improvements. So with that in mind, the ask needs to evaluate the options. So the construction building cost is something that we have to first try to get our head around. And the graph below that was from Mullen and Collins, it illustrates that the cost to perform $95 of work in 2016 costs $115 today. That's a 20% increase in 4 years, which is about a 5% annual increase. Of note, when I make these kind of presentations, I also go out and look and see what I can find nationally and see if there's anything else that I can find from a state perspective. As you're probably all very well aware, there are a lot of huge construction projects going on in Utah, and that is serving to drive up our construction cost index. I believe we are higher than that national average. From a national perspective, I can find data that goes anywhere from 2 to 3%, if you will. But interestingly, I was at an event where Stuart Reed was attending a couple of months ago. It was an outdoor event. And I was seated at his table. I had been asked to do a similar analysis on another project. And so I was discussing with him, and I was like, what do you think you're seeing from a state perspective in terms of construction costs? And he said, I am quite certain from what he has heard from DFM, he said that it's in the neighborhood of 8%. So I think, that way of illustration indicates that 5% may be even conservative. And even at 5%, the numbers are quite compelling, that it makes sense to consider a bond for part of these projects. The table to the right, I can see below is the bond buyer revenue bond. So all utility system revenue bonds, they have they kind of think it's like the Dow Jones kind of stock. So they can tell that see what's happening to those rates over time. And as you can see, it's currently well below the 10-year average. We ran numbers from assuming that the city did bond on some of these projects, and the current estimated to it for a utility revenue bond is below 3% for a 25-year maturity. And I would argue that it might even be below that. Since we ran those numbers a little over a week ago, rates actually went down about 10 basis points. And then yesterday, the euphoria that was happening and the stuff came up about another 5 basis points. But we're still down 5 basis points from where we were. Okay. With that, Chris and his team provided me the construction cost data that they had from the existing master plans. Everything was in 2016 or 2017 dollars. 2017 dollars for stormwater improvement, but 2016 for water improvement. And they had moved that word in terms of construction inflation into like 2026, assuming they were having to do pay as you go and save up money. I took that information and converted it into the proposed cost of 2021 dollars. So it's important to note that this plan that I'll be presenting would anticipate that we would do 2 bond issues, not just one. first of all, why not do it all at once, save on cost, issuance, etc., grab the lowest interest rate that we know are here. Well, the challenge with that is that there are federal tax laws that require the city has to reasonably expect that it will spend 90% of the construction fund within 3 years. So we have to look at what the master plan is showing when those projects will be able to be done. Some of them still need some engineering work done, that kind of thing. And so in this plan, we have broken it up into two bonds. We had a 2021 bond and a 2024 bond. For the 2024 bond, we have continued to inflate those construction costs by 5%, and we have increased the estimated interest rate on those bonds. The city will use $31 million that is saved up, which I think is phenomenal that it has that kind of balance that it can put towards this project. To stay under $1 million, you can see in the table below, it's that next last line item with a number on it. The city contributions from the utility fund on hand is $30,980,000. So we add up all the projects, see what the total needs are, take the money the city has on hand, and arrive at the $63,220,000 in today's cost of what it will cost to pay for those projects.
Laura, can I make a comment?
I was hoping you would, so that I could get a sip of a drink. So yes, please.
So in order to prepare for these numbers, we did evaluate. Neal and Reed and I evaluated what projects. We asked ourselves what projects are multi-generational projects, meaning, what's gonna be in the ground for 75 years, 50 years, 100 years. Let's target those, like Laura said, and stretch those out so that those that are really benefiting from those projects will then be able to actually pay for that. Whereas paying as you go for a 15 or 10 to 15 million gallon or 10 million gallon tank at $10 to $15 million and paying cash for that today, those that will use it will be, our children, us as well, but our grandchildren and into the future. And so the thought was to spread that out and also to have a positive effect on our rates and being able to utilize and leverage our capital to perform other work as well. That's really critical. And so between the three of us, we evaluated the master plans from 2016, and we identified which projects really we felt would qualify for that. We didn't pick projects that would last 20 years or 40 years typically, but those that were multi-generational in nature. So I just wanted to emphasize that.
That's a very good point. I know, frequently it's the perception that all debt is bad. I think from a government perspective, we take that cue frequently from the federal government, whose deficit is mind-boggling. But it's wise to remember that the federal government is borrowing for operational costs as opposed to construction costs. And when a city has a large multi-generational project that it needs to fund, that is not dissimilar to you as an individual for taking out a mortgage for your home. It's a large project. It takes it would take years. We've actually done an analysis of what if you tried to save to pay cash for your home as opposed to taking out a mortgage and buying it. And can you imagine if you were trying to save cash to pay cash for your home in today's mortgage inflation, or not, the inflation cost of things. For these type of projects, it really is wise to consider. It's not like you should do debt for everything, but it's certainly wise to consider that. Okay, moving on. I'll pause. Are there any questions so far? I mean, I'm happy to take them as we go or at the end, however you'd like to do that. Hearing none, I can't see your faces anymore. You've either all fallen asleep. My kids think my job is the most boring thing on earth. And so hopefully you're all still awake. So the bond summary, so the bond statistics, assuming that we're issuing 2 bonds, we ran debt service numbers for those 2 transactions, as I mentioned, one in 2021, one in 2024. You can see the par amount. There's an anomaly in our bond world called original issue premium or discount. It's a matter of whether the bonds, when they are originally purchased, are purchased above 100 cents on the dollar or below 100 cents on the dollar. We used a scale that was provided to us by an underwriter, and their estimates of what might happen as we look out a little bit longer. So you can see the cost of issuance, the construction proceeds that add up to the number that we showed on the previous page for the needs for those items, and the debt service for each of those pieces. That'll come into play in a table we show shortly, where it will show that the city has the adequate revenue capacity to bring those payments in. As you can see, the estimated true interest cost for the 2021 issue is almost, but not quite, but we're hovering close to below 2%, at about 2.2%. The Series 2024 bonds, it is not that I'm a prognosticator of future interest rates, but what we do is we utilize the index that we have. Oh, hold on. Excuse me. We utilize the yield curve index that we have. It's referred to as the Municipal Market Data Index. Thomson Reuters publishes it every day that the market is open. We utilize that index and we move out on the yield curve, and then we also, to be conservative, added another 25 basis points. Rates could be higher than this, they could be lower than this in 2024. So it would probably be wise to reevaluate our bonds, the right things to do in 2024. But our look at the moment guides us to the fact that would be a prudent thing to do. Okay, now you'll have to get out your magnifying glass. I can increase this a little bit. Hold on. There we go. All right, you won't be able to see the whole table, but we'll get to the pertinent part. So the city's minimum debt service coverage requirement on its outstanding bonds is 1.25 times. What that means is that for every dollar of net revenue, so we take the gross revenues, we back out operating expenses less depreciation, and with that, for every dollar of debt they have to show $1.25 of net revenues. So as you can see here, so one of the questions is, oh wow, we're going to bring in these 2 big bond payments. Is that going to be a challenge for the city from a revenue perspective? Are we going to have to look to raise rates? And happily, the answer is no. As you can see here, as I'm scrolling down, we've got the existing bond issues laid out there for you, and then we bring in the estimated annual debt service on the 2021 bonds. So after that first kind of short year, we have $1.7 million of payments, and then on the 2024 bonds, a $2 million payment. So once both of those are layered into the city's revenues and their debt, you can see that their debt service coverage is that bottom line where there are numbers, is well above 1.25 times. I'm expecting that the city will have a rating in the AA category. I think the existing bonds are AA, maybe higher. I'm sorry, I should have thought to check this morning, but I did not. But it's well operated, well maintained. You've got good coverage, you've got excellent coverage. And the other thing that they will look at, so that you can be aware of this from a committee standpoint, because as I look at this, it appears to me that not only will we not need any rate increases, it appears to me that there may be some room for some decreases. You might say, wow, to go down to 1 1/4, you won't need, you can really whack. The challenge with that is that the rating agencies are also concerned their ideal is that you have at least 6, and preferably, you know, on that high platinum way of looking at things, preferably 365 days of operating cash on hand. So it's important that the city maintains good cash balances. But again, the nice thing here, the point here is that the city can layer in this debt without putting a lot of pressure on its utility revenues. I work with cities whose name I won't name, that when we look at this kind of coverage sheet, their coverage is at 1.15. So, you know that the city is in a good stead. Oh, yeah, we need to.
So Laura, bond agencies, they're going to look at these numbers then, and what's their reaction going to be when they see our debt service coverage?
Hallelujah! They wish more cities were similar minds to have that kind of debt service coverage. Again, on the clear other end of the spectrum, I do have cities here in Utah who are barely squeaking by at 1.15 times coverage. Obviously, their rating is not in the AA category. So, you know, they will see this plan, one, that you're putting a lot of your own cash toward this project. That will, you know, provide a lot of kudos. Two, the fact that you have phenomenal coverage, and then they actually look at where your rates are. So even if you had phenomenal coverage, but your rates were among what they view as the most expensive, that's not great for them. They like to know that it's in the realm of affordability, if you will. And so, you know, this comparison of some, you know, cities, comparable cities, lets you see, you know, in black and white or in green and yellow, that the city's rates are in a very good stead in that regard.
Laura, Casey Shaw, I wondered if I could ask just a couple of questions before you move on.
Certainly.
When you indicate that rates don't have to be increased and may be decreased, I know that this committee had recommended and the city council approved a regular increase in rates to fund the pay-as-you-go.
Yes.
So does that mean that the rates freeze at what they are now or decrease from where they are now, or you continue with the inflated rates and they don't change? I'm not sure.
You know, I think that's really is a matter of policy of what the city wants to do. I would argue that based on this presentation, that I don't believe there's a need to continue to increase rates. Now, that stated, it's not just, you know, the rates aren't set just to deal with capital costs. The rates are set to deal with operational costs, and those are going
right.
to inflate. So I have one city that I work with that I really like their approach, and it might be something the city wants to consider. The city increases, they have in place a policy that says every year we're going to address utility rate increases. And a part of the rate increase is to deal with inflation. And so they inflate their water rates every year based on, I can't remember what index they use, but something that kind of tries to capture the western, you know, the western part of the country and the inflation that we're seeing here relative to, you know, increases in health insurance and employment costs and that kind of thing. And then they have another component of their rate that they, you know, adjust to, you know, to deal with capital improvements. So sometimes that element of their increase is zero, while they have, you know, a 1 1/4 or a 2 1/4, you know, percentage increase to capture inflationary issues. So I believe that, you know, the city is, my understanding is the city is, we're working with them, is going to be looking at, you know, your utility rates holistically, and will seek to address the issues related to operational cost increases, as well as, you know, if this plan is adopted on the construction side, we will layer that into the model before making any recommendations as to how those rates need to change. But I do think at a minimum, we ought to be able to, hold them constant, maybe then have that inflationary increase related to operations. But there may be, without trying to save up so much to do pay-as-you-go here, we might still be able to lower the rate. I don't think we know that exact answer yet.
Okay, and then just a quick question to Chris. With the requirement to spend the bond funds within 3 years, that's in excess of $10 million a year in projects. You have to work really hard to spend $10 million in a year, especially on smaller projects. Does the city have the manpower to be able to manage $10 million a year in construction projects over a wide variety? I'm thinking these are probably 10 or 15 projects you're doing each year.
Casey, that's an excellent question, and we've asked ourselves that as well. Some of our projects are ready to go to bid, whereas others, that might take 6 months to 12 months before the designs are completed. And so obviously we're going to need to look at that and be very strategic regarding that. The short answer is no, we're not. We don't have the manpower to do it currently.
I didn't think so. Yeah.
Right. The long answer is for some of these higher profile projects like a water tank, we will roll into that project the construction management services component. We will be heavily involved with it, but we will not be involved with the day-to-day inspections and construction management aspects. Same thing I would suggest with a well. So we have 2 wells, a tank, and we have other large projects like water reuse that I would anticipate we could hire a firm that designs it to also take on the construction management component of that as well. With that said, we've been talking about this, and we realize that we are on the brink of doing something that maybe we've never done before as a city, for sure as us individually, as staff that are currently employed with the city. And so we are looking at ramping up and gearing up for this. With that said, what Laura is presenting it's very detailed and specific, but it is also based on the 2016 master plans. We are updating these master plans, and so I fully anticipate what's being presented here in this level of detail will change. But it is showing, for example, what we could do with these projects that were developed in 16. I anticipate that the inputs here are going to change, not dramatically, but they will change somewhat. I did want to emphasize that too. But Casey, you're absolutely right. We would be understaffed to take on these as currently proposed.
Well, if you can't spend it all in a year, let me know, and I'm sure we can take over what you don't spend and spend it for you, Chris.
Does Central have needs? I didn't know. Okay.
We'll be glad to help you out.
Okay. But we haven't gotten to the rate structure necessarily. Laura's touching on it right now, but I would anticipate our financial model is going to get blown up to some extent because it will include substantial amount of debt service. And therefore, we'll need to reevaluate our rates and what we're going to be doing moving forward. Laura did mention, though, however, we need to at a minimum tie our rates to a CPI or some kind of inflationary index to cover these inflationary forces that are out there.
Well, I certainly would be in favor of having a regular review, an annual review of rates with an inflationary component as well as a capital replacement component, and make that something that occurs every year so that rate increases are not so traumatic as they have been in the past.
Brent, if I could ask you, how does the city council feel about something like that?
Yeah, I agree with that. The council's been very sensitive to the citizens' what costs we're putting on them, and you know, over the years, utility rates haven't been raised little or much, maybe not at all since, what, Chris, 2000, something like that. And what Casey just said, I agree with. We need to review it every year now. And as you know, this year we're at a freeze on the water rates, and I'm sure we'll evaluate as a council that every year.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments.
Yeah, these are great comments, and also very helpful from the perspective of working on the utility rate study. I think the suggestion is right on point in order of what cities need to do to maintain healthy systems and you know, and are ready in case there are emergencies. I mean, the reason that the rating agencies want you to have cash on hand is if there's some unexpected expense, it's not going to, you know, tank the city, and they're not going to have to hurry and jump up rates to deal with that. Anyway, okay, with all of that, then what we did was we looked at pay-as-you-go scenario versus bonding. In this scenario, we've got two that we'll walk through, this and one other. In this scenario, I looked at the annual amount that's deposited from a pay-as-you-go equals what has been being expended currently annually to, you know, either save or to spend on projects. So we've got the construction in the 2021 dollars, the 94 million plus the almost 31 million the city has on hand. That leaves our current remaining funding needs of 63 million. The construction inflation I used was 5%, as we discussed earlier, and then the amount the city is currently spending on utility capital improvements per year is about 6.5 million. On the investment side, because again, if you're doing pay-as-you-go, you'll be earning something on those funds. Currently, not a lot. And I've shown here what my assumptions were when I put the analysis together relative to those interest rates. I use the 5-year treasury for the investment earnings for the first 5 years, 10-year treasury for the 10, 20-year treasury for up to the 20 years, except this year. So in this detailed Excel model, that's what I put in for interest rate earning assumptions on those monies as they're being saved. I've got a 25-line Excel spreadsheet I can show you. What's here at the bottom is a summary of what that looks like at certain points in time. So in you know, in 10 years from now, we end up with a beginning cash balance of 60 million. You're depositing, you know, the 6.5 million. The ending cash balance is 67 million. But oh, we have the horrific construction cost that is going up. You can't ever catch up. Your construction cost estimate at that point is 98 million. The dollar amount of that is shown there, and the ending construction need is 102 million. So the differential in the construction funding deficit is $35 million. You chip away at that, but by the end of 25 years, when the bonds would be paid off, you still have a construction deficit if you're only saving $6.5 million a year, and construction costs continue to inflate at 5%, and you're only earning, you know, less than 2%. The next scenario I looked at, the next scenario I looked at is, okay, so if you want to do pay-as-you-go, and you know, want to pay this off, the city needs to spend about almost $10 million a year. Excuse me, I apologize, I didn't notice this. So that's really $7.3 million a year, and if the city were to put that in place, then somewhere between year 24 and year 25, it would be able to catch up and pay for those improvements. But again, those are improvements that you need today, and you'll be waiting 25 years and, you know, putting Band-Aids and duct tape or whatever on your current system, which is likely going to raise your operational. So the conclusion is that I do understand the general tendency to avoid debt, but for long life, these all have a long useful life, long life projects that are going to be benefiting multi-generations. And in the current environment where construction inflation is so high and bonding costs are so low, it really does make sense to consider that. And a present value analysis of the actual spreadsheet with, you know, year by year by year, and what would you have to put in and pay as you go versus what are your debt payments. It really is quite stunning. I don't have it up for to see, but I've got it on my other computer screen. And if the city is to spend $7.2, almost $7.3 million a year, over time, it will set aside $174 million to pay for those projects. The approximate debt service for that same time period is about $114 million. That's a $16 million savings to bond, which is about a $55 million savings in net present value. So it really is a economic benefit to bond versus trying to, you know, catch up in a high construction inflation environment. And with that, I'll see if there are any more questions.
So the $55 million there is what we need to really pay attention to. That is in today's dollars. That's an approximate saving of shifting from pay-as-you-go, considering the time value of money, versus bonding at these maybe not historically low rates, but extremely low rates currently.
It's not quite historically low, but it's darn close.
So when you marry historically low bonding rates with historically, maybe not historically high construction inflationary rates, I mean, that's like a perfect marriage.
Chris, do we have any idea of whether or not those construction costs are going to change in the future, that inflation 5%? Do we anticipate that it will stay strong?
Well, it's going to change. It's going to go up. We don't know how much. We do know, though, in the last 5 years, it's been going up on average about 5% a year. It's gone up 20%. Our cost of construction is 20% higher today than it was in 2016. And Laura even mentioned that it could be even about 8% a year. So we're probably on the low end there. I fully anticipate that construction will increase, costs will increase, maybe not at the same pace that we're at right now, but I think 5% is a reasonable value to consider.
Yeah,
Thank you.
One of the things of note in that regard is, again, all the huge construction projects that are going on in Utah. You've got the prison, you've got the Port Authority, the Inland Port Authority, and that is just, you know, sucking away at the construction labor force and driving costs up. I mean, you all, you know, probably have some sense as to what's happening to housing costs. And it's the same thing. And if you've tried to hire an electrician, which, I have, you can't find someone to come do like a small job at your house. It's ridiculous. So, you know, the sense is, again, as I was having this brief conversation with Stuart Reed, is that the state for several years is going to still be under that kind of construction pressure. You know, I mean, it's really hard to predict long out future. I don't know in 10 years, but I think in the foreseeable 5-year window, I think it's going to continue to be.
I'll just add our perspective as well. And most of our contractors now are on a concrete ration because the plants cannot provide sufficient concrete or cement powder. And so they are being rationed on concrete, which makes costs go up even further. But we're seeing, because of all the large construction projects, the same construction cost index. We're hoping that it abates, but we're not seeing that in the next 2 to 3 years.
And also what is looming on the horizon are significant construction costs or construction projects in the water reclamation industry. And so with nutrient removal at treatment plants, I believe Provo City was looking at over 200 million. Salt Lake City was looking at around $700 million. So these construction trades are going to be stretched well into the future based on these regulatory, these increasing regulatory influences too. So the airport's done, mostly, I suppose. I don't know exactly, but it's significantly done. That was taking away a lot of the construction trades from our ability to perform work here as well. So yeah, what I see in the next 5 to 10 years is a very robust economy with a lot of construction efforts going on, municipal and private. So I think this is a really wise move going forward for Orem to consider the bond. Devin, I don't know which one you want. There we are. Devin, I'd like to turn the time back over to you. We did, just for your information, we did have an introduction at the beginning into the construction, or excuse me, into the master plan updates. That'll be presented tonight. Again, we'll be sending out that link to everybody. And we also had the minutes approved.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to turn the rest of the time over to you if you wanted to further discuss anything, or if there's any other questions, I'll turn that time over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Laura, for presenting, and I'm sorry again that I was late. Does anyone else have questions that they'd like to ask or thoughts?
This is Carol. A very good presentation, Laura. Thank you so much. It was very helpful to understand all of that. I do think, for me, that was quite amazing to see how much money the city saves if we do bond. So thank you.
You're welcome. I have to say, I was even stunned. I mean, I did this analysis myself. I was asked to do it on another project a while ago, and it's almost like, really, I mean, I kept checking my numbers. I kept, because it really is quite stunning and compelling.
Okay. If no one else has any questions, then I guess our next agenda item would be our next meeting. Chris, do you have a preference on when we meet next?
Well, I know Decembers are particularly challenging with people they have Christmas parties and other events and activities, but in light of COVID, I don't know that that's really as big of a concern as we've had in the past. So if we'd like to meet in December, we can. Otherwise, I would recommend at least meeting in January. To give you an update regarding the bonding and this bond scenario, we're looking at, with the Public Works Advisory Commission's support and endorsement, we're looking at making these recommendations to the City Council. In preparation, Laura will be assisting and performing this work, but she'll be preparing a bond, what is called the Bond Parameters Resolution, that has to be adopted by the governing body, which is our City Council. And the Bond Parameters Resolution basically define, what we could look to not exceed, or giving Laura a direction to move forward with our Bond Council to acquire bonds for these projects. That Bond Parameters Resolution can stay in place for 1 year to 18 months perhaps. So we're not suggesting that we're going to go out to Bond Council and start acquiring bonds in January, but it does allow them to move forward and give them the green light to do so as soon as we feel like we're far enough along with design and projects that are ready, shovel ready to move forward.
And Chris, if I could interject, the other benefit of getting that bond parameters resolution done is it paves the way to allow the city to reimburse itself for any expenditures that it makes on the project if it so desires to do a reimbursement.
Thank you.
Chris,
Well, go ahead,
Devin,
Craig.
just one comment, and I'm sure Chris and Laura thought about this, but the presentation anticipates that we'll do an early bond for about $30 million, and then a later bond in 24 for another $30+ million. It's very possible that interest rates won't be as favorable in 2024, and so the city would need to be careful to craft a program that would allow them to spend the $30 million on projects that are of the highest priority. And then you may need to pause and say, well, do we then go pay as you go again because of bond rates have increased or not? We just need to make certain that those projects are crafted carefully so that we don't anticipate a bond issuance in 2024 and then interest rates turn out to be 10%, and you don't want to do that.
Right.
That's exactly right.
I would like to propose that our next meeting be on January 12th, which would be the second January of the month, or the second Tuesday of the month in January. I just received a text from Val Hale. Val, I don't think you're going to be able to be with us at that meeting. Is that right?
Well, my wife and I have been called on a mission to Los Angeles, and we actually leave the 18th of January. So I guess it's up to you whether you want to be on the 12th or not. We're going to be out the door down in Los Angeles, and where they have some real challenges. I'm glad I'm not serving on this committee in Los Angeles.
Well, congratulations, Val, to you and your wife. We appreciate all of your hard work and support. You've been with us since the beginning with Casey and Carol and
Ty.
Ty. Those are our original PWAC members. So you've really helped us to blaze the trail here that we've needed to move forward. And we appreciate also what you've been doing for us and as a state employee working in economic development for the state of Utah. So thank you for your time and for your hard work, and we appreciate the time that we've had with you.
Ditto from Carol.
That put me to work again.
Congratulations, Val. Chris, I think that January is fine if you'd like to have that little bit more time over the holidays so you don't feel so rushed with kind of planning out what would be phase one and such. If that's okay with everyone else to plan on
January 12th.
Sounds good to me. I've got it on my calendar.
Yeah, that works for me.
Yeah, me too.
Right. Thanks, everyone.
See January 12th.
Great job, Laura. Thank you. We appreciate
Oh,
it.
thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Till later.
All right. Be safe.
All right. I assume our meeting's over?
I think so. Do we have to formally request to adjourn, or can everyone just shut off their phones at this point?
I move we adjourn, Devin.
I second. All else in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Have a good
Thank
Christmas.
you. Have a great day.
And thanks,
everyone.
Bye-bye.